Now, the United States spent 2.3 trillion pounds, that's T, trillion pounds, on the war in Afghanistan. When they scuttled out like thieves in the night, leaving their allies in the lurch in Afghanistan, bringing back to power the very people that the whole 20-year Afghan war had been about crushing and defeating and driving out of power and keeping them out of power, they left behind $80 billion worth of material, of military hardware, oftentimes of the most sophisticated and oftentimes brand new models. 80 billion. Why do I mention it? Well, partly because the Taliban are in the news this morning, because they have tightened their hideous diktat to the women of Afghanistan about what clothes they have to wear. It goes without saying, I deplore that. But even more than deploring that, I deplore the fact that having occupied them for 20 whole years, the longest war in America's history, in Britain's history, well, not in Britain's history, we fought a 100-year war against the French and may do so again. But it's America's longest war. Having occupied them for 20 years, having killed untold tens, scores of thousands of them, maybe hundreds of thousands of them over that 20 years, and having run out on them, despite all the promises that we made, the Afghan people are currently starving. And the liberal airwaves and newsprint columns are filled with anguished people talking about the clothes that Afghan women now have to wear. What about the fact that the Afghan women are starving, whatever they're wearing or not wearing? That their children are starving? That the whole country is in a state of mass starvation? Don't we have some obligations in that? You'll see where I'm going with this in just 1 minute. But not only have we deserted them, left most of the country starving, was wringing our hands about burqas, we have stolen $7 billion of their money that they entrusted into American banks. We've stolen it, and we've given half of it to the victims of 9/11. But no Afghan was involved in 9/11. No single Afghan had anything remotely to do with 9/11. It was Saudis that did that crime. And as we now discover, with Saudi government involvement in released papers this very week, it's revealed that the Saudi government was up to its neck in the crime of 9/11. Why aren't you seizing their money instead of the poor, hungry, benighted Afghans? Now, I mention all these numbers because Joe Biden has just announced that he's going to give $33 billion to the Ukraine for more and more and more weapons, much of which is destroyed before it even gets to the battlefield, much of which is stolen and sold, including to the Russian invaders. Others of it is ending up on the dark web. Others of it doesn't work at all, including, rather embarrassingly, the £200,000 British-made missiles that didn't explode and were filmed by the people amongst whom they fell this very day, if you look for it on social media. 33 billion in a country, the United States, which is falling apart at the seams, whose students have $1 trillion student debt that they cannot pay, whose workers are on a pathetic minimum wage, utterly pathetic minimum wage, much worse than the British minimum wage, and who are increasingly unemployed, underpaid, facing rocketing inflation, prices that they literally cannot pay. Not can only pay with a grump, a growl, more about growls in a minute, but they cannot pay because of American sanctions on Russia, that great stone that the Western governments in the European Union, Britain, and the United States have struggled mightily to lift, only to drop on their own feet. This America that couldn't pass a stimulus budget, remember the stimulus budget that never passed, is going to spend $33 billion on more military hardware for a war that cannot be won and is even right now, this day, being lost, comprehensively lost. So I'm asking tonight, not my usual question, would you send Joe Biden out for a loaf? Because I wouldn't. I wouldn't expect him to come back with the right loaf or the right change or even to come back at all. But he's the president of the United States that is spending money like a drunken sailor, not on its own people, but on military equipment and material to pour into the ravenous jaws of war, the proxy war that they now openly admit is a proxy war between the United States and Russia.